Hello, everyone. I'm Mystery.
And I'm the Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we are the Duality of Man. And today we're basically doing a version of Jerry Springer. You are not the father.
Yeah, we're talking about paternity fraud, and it can be really devastating to a lot of men, understandably. I mean, finding out you're not the father of your kid throws anybody's life into a turmoil.
Or realizing you've been forced to erroneously take care of a kid that is not yours.
Yeah, but there is a tiny bit of hope coming through in the state of Tennessee, where a state representative is proposing legislation that would make DNA tests mandatory for newborns. So if you get the DNA test and find out you're not the father, you don't put your name on the birth certificate, and you are free and clear.
Like, why this wasn't already in laws? Well, the obvious reason is because no one gives a fuck about men, but in a sane, rational world, a world completely dissimilar from the world in which we find ourselves, such a thing would be default common practice, I would think.
Yeah. All right. So let me get into the article. This is from a website called uh, the Tennessean. I think it's like a newspaper for things that are going on in Tennessee. But it says recently I was approached by a young man who told me he had been in a long-term relationship. Together they had a son, and he signed the voluntary acknowledgement of paternity. They were not married. 5 years later, he found out the mother had been unfaithful during the time they were together. He and the child took a DNA test. The results proved that he was not the father. Subsequently, the relationship ended. I mean, obviously.
I would fucking hope so. Yes, that makes sense.
The woman then sued him for child support. The audacity of some of these
Is
people.
it? Is it? Why don't you try to sue the person whose genetic material you found so superior to the person you were with for several years?
See, in juvenile court, he presented the DNA evidence to the magistrate and was basically told, now this fucking got me the first time I wrote it, dude. The magistrate told him, somebody's got to feed him and it will be you.
But again, why isn't it the responsibility? Okay, okay. Even putting aside the disproportionate like parental responsibilities on display here of like, why isn't the mother's responsibility to get a fucking job at any interval? But even putting aside that, why in all of the fucks wouldn't you just go after the person you were unfaithful with? Like instead of the person who reliably was a surrogate father for this kid for several years, probably has some emotional connection to him, but is understandably rather pissed off that he was lied to on a frankly inhuman scale for several years.
She may not even know who he is or where he is.
Okay. And at no point is the mother going to be held liable for this decision. No, it's going to be on the otherwise reliable and perfectly reasonable dude that's doing this. Hmm. Microcosm of humanity in a fucking nutshell.
He was ordered to pay child support and found in arrears. Eventually, his license was suspended and he was pulled over and jailed for driving on a suspended license. Sitting in jail, he lost his job because he voluntarily signed it because the woman lied to him and told him it was his, and it had passed a 5 year period to rescind the voluntary acknowledgement. He was deemed a legal parent. Through this process, the actual biological parent child was stolen from him. That's another
Oh,
point because maybe the biological father, if he knew he had a kid, would have wanted to be involved, but because she lied and said it was this guy, now he'll may never know.
okay, and moreover, like, why is there only a 5 year statute of limitations on this shit? Considering that the typical like gestation period for a child is between like 18 and 26 now. Moreover, even further, in contract law, there are loopholes for if you are forced to sign a contract under false pretenses, it can be annulled and shit. Like this is like civil court 101 type shit. So exactly how in the fuck does it not apply when, whoops, I'm you know on an 18-year track to raise a kid who's not mine because someone lied to me, and apparently the like statute of limitations is 5 years out of the 18 to 26 that any reasonable person would be on the hook for. Like, the fuck.
Like you could steal a bag of chips, and that's a crime. But this is apparently perfectly fine according to the United States justice system.
And you could be charged for that theft, although admittedly the charge would be minimal. Whenever, basically whenever the person who ran the store became aware of that. So if a person steals a bag of chips or robs a store, um, and then gets away with it for 5 years, he can still be brought up because statute of limitations hasn't run out. But the statute of limitations on the bitch lied to me and I've been raising a son that's not mine is apparently shorter than if you commit like petty theft at a corner store. Hey,
Let me
just
get back into the article. Let's see. Finally, under this scenario, the child's right to have their legal biological father listed on their birth certificate, and in some cases, their lives were stolen from them. Also, this is a thought that I just thought of. Uh, because there are lots of conditions that could be related to genetics, it could be incredibly damaging to not know who your real father is, because then you don't know what diseases or conditions you might need
he
to look
could
out.
have a genetic predisposition to alcoholism. He could have a genetic predisposition to Alzheimer's. He could have a
Or
genetic
diabetes,
predisposition to
blood clots,
cancer.
cancer, heart disease, like whatever.
Yeah, it's the list is longer than the fucking article. But
Yeah, and like given that, like I don't understand why this person can't be sued at least in civil court for like serious damages.
again, there are recourses for if you are erroneously made to sign a contract under false pretenses, your consent can be annulled. And the statute of limitations is, as far as I'm aware, unlisted in most cases. So how exactly the frick do I'm forced to raise a child because I didn't jump on the lie that I was told, you know, uh, 5 years early enough? Like, what? That's so, like, contracts are important and all, but contracts relating to the dispensation of someone's life and childhood are, in my thinking, even more important. So they should have even more hoops to jump through to make sure that the consent of the person who signed the contract is, valid. Oh wait, never mind. It's a man who's victim of this. So we can't hold an egalitarian standard. It has to be the freaking gynocentric one. Because the mother totally shouldn't be, obliged to get a fucking job and support her own damn self because she built something on a lie and infidelity and basically traumatized this kid and their surrogate father and possibly the real father if he could ever be found.
Like the court's reasoning is that the child has to be paid for, but there are other things that are more important than necessarily finances. Like for example,
Bitch, get a
knowing
job.
like knowing medical history, and also yes, bitch, get a job.
like, are you not involved in this equation? You had the child, you lied about it, erroneously had this guy who apparently is a fairly loyal person taking care of the child for at least 5 years. God only knows how long this went on for before he figured it out. But like, there is no agency in this scenario except for the mother's agency, and yet she is not at all held accountable for her use of that agency. But the surrogate father can be held responsible for his complete and utter lack of agency at any point in this process. Okay.
Yeah, look, that's the other thing. Like one of the reasons why we have this is to hold someone accountable for the child they created. But you're not doing that in this scenario. You're holding a completely innocent bystander. In fact, somebody who was a victim of fraud responsible for what somebody else has done. Like that is a complete inversion of justice.
Yeah, the only person who exhibited any agency or anything resembling agency in this process was the mother, and yet she is not at all held accountable for any of that use of agency. But this poor guy who raised a kid for 5+ years, um, who probably developed an emotional connection to the damn thing, um, is realizing that his life is built on a lie, that he was forced to effectively sign a contract against his, against his will or under false pretenses, and then he is on the hook for child support that a child that isn't even his, because the one and only person who exhibited agency in this scenario is a woman, and we can't hold women accountable for the uses of their agency because that would be misogyny. But we
Like
can totally shackle a man who did nothing wrong for agency that he didn't use, because someone has to be held accountable and women get out of agency scot free. But that totally isn't misandry, lol. God, I hate this so much.
like a child could get really messed up from this kind of situation. So you have this guy who you loved. Turns out he's not your father. Your mother's been lying to you your entire life. Now you have to watch this guy shell out money who he may understandably never want to see you again. And the guy who is your actual biological father, you have no idea where or who the hell he is.
Yeah, the guy is not the only victim here. It's also the child. I don't know the gender of the child, whether
The
it's
child's a boy.
okay. Well, then this adds yet another misinterest wrinkle to this whole canard. So the little boy you created with this punter that you cheated on this other extremely loyal guy with, um, he is going to grow up with childhood trauma because of this nonsense. His surrogate father is going to have trauma because of this nonsense, and neither of them uh, exhibited any agency in this matter whatsoever. But the only person who we can hold accountable, the only person who did use an affirmative use of agency in this scenario, oh, it's a woman, so holding her accountable would be misogyny, but holding male humans accountable for shit that they didn't do and or are the result of, um, that's totally not misandry. Lol. Just double standards. I can't even.
Let's see. There's more. It says multiple reports state that 1/3 of the signatures on birth certificates from unmarried couples do not reflect the biological fathers. 1/3, and I'm willing to bet it's even higher than that because those are just the guys.
Yeah, that's just the like reportable number probably. Fuck.
Like Jesus, how hard is it to just stay loyal to someone? And if you're not, just break up with them. Like
How hard is it to be held accountable for the agency that you and you alone use in such a situation? Like, god damn it. If there was ever a universe where men could get away with this kind of shit, there would be riots in every street on fucking Earth. But women get it just gratis because we have inherent sentimental value for women. Sucks to be you, Sonny. You were born with a dick, and therefore the most you can do maybe is transition. And we
I
might
mean,
have slightly more regard for you than we otherwise would.
that's just
Maybe.
unmarried. I don't know what the married numbers are, and if they are married, like the fallout would be so much worse because then you'd probably also have to pay alimony as well.
Well, let's also be perfectly clear. A lot of times, marriages that are going through trouble, the woman will get pregnant on purpose to keep the guy around. Whether that pregnancy is his doing or not is yet another question that can be added to the pile of fuck ups. But you know, there is that sort of emotional and paternal blackmail of, well, I have a child now, so so you are bound to me until the child is capable of being a full-fledged being in its own
Yeah.
right.
Like imagine like you find out that your girlfriend's parent, so you're pregnant, so you know want to do what used to be considered the noble thing, and you get married only to find out that the child was never even yours to begin with. I mean, you your entire life is basically now destroyed because of this lie.
Or at the very least 18 to 26 years of it have been stolen from you. Like just amputated off of your lifespan like freaking Death Note.
Yeah, like and say like you actually wanted to be a father and you actually wanted to have your own family. Like now, like your prime years to start a family and raise your children have been stolen from you because they lied. And so now, if you want to have your own children, maybe you don't have the resources or the time left to actually, raise like or have
Or your
children of your own.
fertility is lower or something along those. Yeah, like and I know I sound a little bit eugenicist when I bring up the evolutionary angle, but some people some people devoting their resources to kids who aren't theirs, that's probably going to be somewhat inevitable at some point. But you've basically been ejected from the gene pool at that point. You know, on an evolutionary timescale, you have failed. Your genes do not get passed on if you are raising someone else's kid. Doesn't mean you should have no emotional regard for them, but it is the rawest of raw deals from an evolutionary perspective. Your connection to the infinite, your legacy, your bloodline is neutered now because you were too busy raising someone else's kid that you didn't realize was someone else's kid.
Yeah, like I think the situation gets worse because I've heard stories where the family has multiple children and then none of them are his.
Aha. And once again, who exhibited agency in this scenario? The woman. Who are we holding accountable to it? Literally anyone but the woman.
Like, let's see, under House Bill 2698 slash Senate Bill 1777, unwed fathers could still voluntarily sign, but in order for the birth certificate to be officially validated, the starter must provide the results of a DNA test to vital records. This will ensure that the actual biological father is listed on the birth certificate of the child. Let's see. Oh, you're going to love this part. The Tennessee Department of Human Services, DHS, who oversees the child support program, is fighting vigorously to kill the bill.
Is it? Well, who could have predicted this? Every motherfucker. Oh.
Yeah, as the government, should we do something to help our citizens? Fuck that noise.
We have to lavish women with more and more governmental entitlement in the name of rights.
I think they're
Wait,
doing this in.
don't we have 49% of our population that is male? Shouldn't we do something for them ever? No. In fact, you're immoral for suggesting such a thing.
Let's see. The I think they're doing this mostly for themselves. It says here, why? Because the department fears any changes in their enforcement rules could potentially jeopardize the 52 million in funding it receives from the federal government for its child support enforcement.
Well,
Government bureaucrats doing everything in their power to secure their positions, even at the
well,
expense.
also thank you for acknowledging that the government literally on paper does not give a shit about men. Because the only reason that this would jeopardize your funding is if the fact that child support is considered predominantly a woman's issue is a large part of the sentimental reason why you're being funded, and if the government catches you doing something nice for men, they will cut your funding. Because if
Well,
it
here also
because if it's a general human issue, then that means that it's just normal, just neutral, and we don't have any moral obligation to help. If it's a man's issue, then we have every reason to be contemptuous and shame and shun it. And only if it's a woman's issue do we have any obligation to be sentimentally attached. Is the party line of fucking everyone. it
Well,
seems.
if they're worried about collecting child support payments, why not just collect them from the guy that actually did the deed?
That's the other thing. Like, as long, even outside of the men's rights portion of it, which is be fucked beyond all reason, shouldn't we be shaming the men who knock people up and then leave, rather than the men who at least have the moral fortitude to stay with a family that they assume is theirs, even
Well,
under false pretenses?
if they know and then leave, sure, but some of them may not even know.
Well, that's true too. I'm just saying, like, given, let's play the male shame game. We have two male specimens, one of which knocks someone up and then either through ignorance or through malice left. The other of which has shown strength of moral character by sticking with a family that might not even be his own. Who should we reward and who should we punish in such a situation? Oh wait, no, we're shaming the responsible one, because why the fuck not? Okay. Because responsibility is just a artifact of the patriarchy and therefore is an immoral wrong we should purge, I guess.
Yeah, this just reminds me of the old saying that nothing is more permanent than a temporary government agency. Because instead of actually, fixing the problem, so the problem is fixed, these people are advocating to allow the problem to continue so they can keep their jobs.
But see, I don't even think that factors into it. I don't think the sheer opportunistic angle really factors into it. I think it's just the idea of women might be held accountable for doing something wrong, and men might be not held accountable for not doing something wrong. Um, just chase their sense of emotional and moral justification, because a lot of these civil servants will get into these positions for the sake of having this, nebulous empathy for victims. And when you say to a person who gets into like civil service because of quote unquote empathy for quote unquote victims, that that a change in policy might uh, positively affect a person that you think is normally the perpetrator rather than the victim, it morally chased them. I think more so even than the opportunistic angle.
I don't think that they actually do care about women. First of all, it's a government. I don't think they actually care about anybody. Because here's the thing: like, say there's a woman with a child, and she gets a speeding ticket, runs a red light, whatever, and they slap her with this fine. They don't care that she has a child to raise. She still has to pay that fine. So how are they going to claim, oh, it's in the best interest of the child for the man to pay this when they don't care if they're taking money away from the women if, like, say they commit infraction, but they're willing to take money away and punish this man who committed no infraction and is in
Well,
fact the victim.
they're different sections of the government. The people who are in social work and in like child protective services are the sorts of people who have oodles and oodles and oodles of empathy only in the abstract, but they nominally convince themselves that they are good people, and that's part of their motivation for getting into child protective services and shit. Now, granted, that always backfires because, as we know, the constant hatred for practical solutions over abstract moralizing ruins fucking everything all the time in every circumstance.
Let's see. There's a bit more to the article. In addition, DHS could also potentially receive millions more for reaching a quota of 90% acknowledged births, with yet another bonus out there for exceeding the quota. Just acknowledged births, not accurate, just acknowledged. So there is possibly a huge financial motivation to turn a blind eye to individuals blindly signing the VAP form. The DHS program actually aids paternity fraud by allowing unsuspecting putative fathers to blindly sign a birth certificate without DNA proof of actual biological fatherhood.
This reminds me of the feminist reaction to the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, where there were literally articles saying, if we let Johnny Depp off, even if it looks like he didn't do it, then then that's condoning all of the male abusers ever. And it's like, bitch, she didn't do it. What are you like? Do we literally have to use Johnny Depp as a scapegoat so that no male perpetrator will ever get off? And that actually seemed to have been the party line in a lot of cases of like after the evidence came out, it's like, yeah, sure, the evidence looks like it's on Johnny's side, but don't you know Amber Heard is the abstract avatar of all womanhood? Oh God, I hate the prioritizing of abstraction and morality over practical and straightforward logic. I hate it so much. It's the source of so many evil things.
See, it says, in fairness to DHS, there's a 60-day grace period to remove your name from a birth certificate. Also, a father can contest paternity court where a DNA test will be ordered. There's a 5-year period where one could go through expensive legal process to rescind the voluntary acknowledgement of paternity, but they will have the burden of proving it was done fraudulently.
And again, I hate to bring this up, but in ordinary non-gendered civil court, signing a contract under false pretenses is something you can litigate over, and it doesn't have a 5-year statute of limitations. So why does the far more important, issue of paternity, the far more strict contract of paternity, have less of a grace period than just random civil nonsense? Fucking,
Also, like, only 60 days is nothing to take your name off of. Like, you could not have any idea in 60 days. And again, in the 5-year period, like, that's expensive. A lot of people may not have money, and also they again they may not even like suspect.
it's also worth noting how many babies look almost identical for the first 5 years. Like it takes around 5 years for a a child's resemblance, if you like, to show. So it
And
could be that it's literally set up that way so that, the second the father has any inclining, it's too late.
also, if they look much more like the mother, then the mother could just argue, "Oh, like the child takes strongly
Yeah,
after
he
me.
took
Like, there's no
strong after
issue."
me.
You know? So it was after this 5-year period where the young man I was talking about was locked in legally for blindly signing the voluntary acknowledgement of paternity. All of this can be remedied by simply requiring a DNA test on the front end to alleviate any challenges and potential emotional scarring for the child, the wrongfully accused father, the mother, and the rightful biological father. We always see the words do what's best for the child. As a state, we should do just that, keep the child at the forefront and do what's best on the front end to minimize the pain and hurt on the back end.
I just why wouldn't it be more meaningful to reunite the son with his actual father? Not saying that he can't have love and affection for the person who actually raised him and shit, but why aren't we putting prioritizing any of this effort towards, hey, let's make sure that the sons have connections to their actual fathers or daughters, if you like. But you know what I'm saying? Like, why is it it's okay to condemn this child to being raised by someone who is not their father? Because if if we didn't do that, then it would have no one. Because of course
I
the
think
mother isn't a factor in this situation, apparently.
I honestly think that the Department of Human Services stuff does play a role because we've literally created an incentive for these people to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, because we prioritize giving women as many entitlements in the name of rights as possible, and keeping men exactly where they were 300 years ago. Fucking, it's almost like irrationally disregarding and being indifferent towards the plight of men ends up ultimately hurting everyone, but we can't acknowledge it because that would imply that men actually have some sort of inherent moral worth like women do. And how dare you insinuate such a thing? That's misogyny to insinuate that men are even remotely equal to women in the moral dimension.
And to go back on reuniting with the actual biological father, in some cases, like even when the biological father is known and the presumed father like involves it and says, no, this isn't my child, this is this other guy's child, the court can still say, well, you have more money, you have more resources, and you would do a better job providing. So we're basically going to make you, this child,
It's
meet the
literally
father.
you are more responsible, therefore you are being punished.
Yes, it's like,
And sometimes even the mother will basically say about that, like, well, yeah, I got this other guy knocked up, or I got myself knocked up by this other guy, but the guy I choose to cohabitate with is more responsible. Which brings up the immortal question of, if you knew he was more responsible and you knew he was a better fit as the father, why in the name of all the gods did you not simply have his child? Oh, the
because
other
we,
guy the other guy is more thrilling and ruffles your jimmies more? Oh, I see. Well, fine then, I suppose.
yeah,
Nothing we can do. Just ho hum. There's nothing that can be done. We can't hold you accountable for your agency or your choices. Just ho hum, the other guy was more exciting for 5 seconds but didn't stick around, and the more responsible one apparently was still unworthy of taking your egg. So whatever.
yeah. If there's one thing that I've learned from watching videos regarding male and female relationships and interactions is that the feeling of excitement and thrill will cause women to do the stupidest decisions you can ever imagine.
Because it again, I think it's related to this whole prioritizing the abstract over the straightforward and literal. Like they have a narrative in their head about every woman being basically a princess waiting for their dashing rogue or their knight in shining armor. So if they get that like internal romance novel sense from a guy of like, oh, he's the dashing rogue, he's the bodice ripper, like instant, no higher brain functions, no, but wait, aren't there practical considerations here? None of that. They want the I am the protagonist of the universe feeling. So damn the consequences.
Like, I really hope that the Tennessee legislature tells the DHS to go shove it and gets this bill through because, as we're seeing with Florida and the bill they passed ending permanent alimony, like if this gets started in Tennessee, maybe it could be exported to other states. Now, obviously, not every state because some states are still like gripped by feminism and wokeness that these things will be dead on arrival. But maybe in certain states, like this could actually spread and
And
guys
and
like
and, and keep in mind, I think it only has to be agreed upon by 2/3 of the state for it to be passed as a national standard. So as long as the 2/3 of non-woke states can agree on some version or other of similar laws, then we can get it seen to on a national level, and the feminists can't do shit.
okay, I actually have to go because I have family coming over. But last thing I want to say is that if there's anyone in Tennessee who is listening to this, and there are women you know who are opposed to this, ask yourselves why.
Yeah, and remember the golden rule, lads. Don't stick it in crazy. And this
All
is
right, then.
crazy. This is a prime example of crazy that you should not be sticking it in.
All right, everyone. I've been Mystery.
I've been Dalton Mortimer, the Authenticator. We have been the Duality of Men. Cheers, guys.
Bye, everybody.